Let me tell you a story. In the book, Hard Times, the great voice of working people and a proud Chicagoan, Studs Terkel, recalls a small-town newspaper publisher named Fred Sweet in Ohio, who had supported an organizing drive at a factory there by reporting honestly about it. Just told the truth, told about the outrageous, unfair practices that employers did, about what workers were aspiring to. Well, you can imagine that didn't sit well with business owners in the area. So the head of the biggest department store in town told Fred to get off his union kick. And then he pulled all of his ads from the paper. Well, the organizing effort continued, and the workers finally won a fair contract. But unfortunately, the paper went out of business. And a few months later, the owner of the department store grabbed Fred, the same guy who pulled the ads, to tell him how great it was to have all those workers pouring into his store with bigger paychecks every week. Business is booming, said he. You were right, he said, and I was wrong. That town's business community learned an important lesson. But quite frankly, who remembers that lesson today? What business owners remember that lesson? Or think about the words of Henry Ford, who said, if I don't pay workers a decent wage, they won't be able to buy the products that I make. America is once again like that small Ohio town before the organizing effort. And part of what we have to do is to tell that story. We have to explain to people who genuinely fear for their future that their insecurity is not caused by the firefighter who still has a pension, or by the auto worker, union auto worker who still has job security, or by government spending that protects the most vulnerable, builds critical infrastructure, and creates jobs. See, we have to explain that the insecurity is caused by an economy and a political system that have been thrown out of balance, and that a voice for workers is the solution, not a problem. But the task ahead is too big for a fragmented and compartmentalized labor movement. So we must change. And at our last Executive Council, we adopted that change and a process to further that change at the National, State, and Central Labor Council levels of the AFL-CIO. And we challenged our affiliates. It's not enough for us to change. You must change as well. Those unions must change at all levels as well. And there is a great appetite among our members for that. See, we need a labor movement that can truly act collectively to represent all workers, and we intend to create one. I used this example at the Executive Council. Imagine an army arrayed for battle and had a battlefront, and the order comes down from the leader, charge, and a third of those troops charge ahead, and a third of those troops retreat, and a third of those troops stay in place wondering what they should do. Brothers and sisters, that's the labor movement that we have. And that's got to change. When we all say charge, all of us, not a few of us, not even most of us, but all of us have to be willing to charge together. Almost 25 years ago, my predecessor, George Meany, told the delegates to the 1979 AFL-CIO convention. The labor movement cannot be content with defending the status quo or reliving past glories. We must constantly look to the future, develop new leadership, adopt policies to changing conditions and new techniques, but always, always with unswerving loyalty to the mission of the trade union movement as the instrument for improving and enhancing the working and living conditions of those who work for wages. Now, I guess we could read that quote as comforting. We could read it as affirming that the labor movement has never been blind to the challenges that we face. Quite frankly, I don't read it that way. I read George Meaning's words as a warning that words may sound good, and we may take great comfort in those words, but in reality, they can be nothing but excuses unless we move to action and make those words a living thing. And I got to tell you, brothers and sisters, the time for excuses is over. It is time for us to collectively mobilize and act. So.